Okay, looks like we're live. I want to thank everybody for tuning into this program. I've been wanting to do this interview for a while. I'll be interviewing this morning Michael A. Rogers. He's an author of a book which I purchased about a month and a half ago. It's called Inmillennialism. I don't know if you could see that. Inmillennialism, Redefining the Last Days. It's really one of the best books on eschatology that I've read in a long time. And it presents an eschatological system, which I would call partial preterist. Of course, the author may have his own input on this, but Inmillennialism is basically as a system that holds that we're in the parousia now, and the parousia is a dispensation. Before we get into the details of the system, I just want to welcome our guest to the program, Michael A. Rogers. It's great to have you. How are you, sir?
I'm fine, Phelan. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, you're welcome. My pleasure. So I bought this book. I saw one of your interviews on another program. I think it was Eschatology Matters, and I thought it was a great interview. And one of the things that stood out in that interview was I had just gotten done reading I.P. Warren's book on the parousia. It's written about a century and a half ago. It's one of my favorite books on eschatology, if you can believe it. And I had said to myself after reading that book, I said, wow, I said, imagine if somebody had held to that view that, the parousia is a dispensation, we're in it now. And then I saw your interview and I was like, wow, this is great. So I ordered your book, I read your book, and I noticed that you referenced that. You have a pretty extensive history, I guess, with preterism. Just open it up, I guess, and just give a little introduction on yourself and how you came to this position, if you could.
Okay. I was raised in a typical Southern Baptist church, and I think the prominent view of eschatology was dispensationalism. I don't really remember a lot, but I think that's what it was. And I went to college, not well prepared for what I was going to encounter there. Got away from the faith. And the Lord started dealing with me toward the end of my college career, and I started searching for the truth that was in the Bible. And I went through a long series of steps that included being a part of the Church of Christ denomination, and then Independent Baptist denomination. And finally came to see the Reformed faith, and that just spoke to my soul. I latched onto that very strongly. And so I was settled in my soteriology and a lot of other areas of theology pretty well, I felt like. And I was ordained as a minister at age 40 and started pastoring a church in Northeast Arkansas, a little rural Baptist church. And there was a sister there that was quite a free spirit. She had been a motorcycle mama, a druggie, and things like that. And the Lord had delivered her. And she was just really anxious to know what God had to say to her in the Bible. And she ordered James Stewart Russell's book, The Parousia, at a venture. She didn't know what it was. She just wanted to know about prophecy. And a few weeks later, she brought it to me as her pastor and said, "This is more than I bargained for. Would you be willing to read this and tell me what you think?" I started reading it and was very impressed with his consistency. And I know, Phelan, you said you one time were a full preterist. And so I know you're probably familiar with James Stewart Russell.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So I thought, hey, this is great. This is making a lot of sense of the New Testament. And within a few, chapters, I was able to predict what he would say about given passages, and even some passages that I had wondered about myself, I was able to see where they would fit within his framework. But as time went on, I started realizing the implications of where he was headed And they included the fact that the resurrection had already occurred in conjunction with the destruction of the temple in AD 70. That, and I know he has some nuances about Revelation 20, and he has a few verses in there that he puts beyond AD 70, but almost totally he put everything being fulfilled in conjunction with the destruction of the temple. And that just rocked my world. I just I said, if this is true, where are we? What's going on? What do we have to look forward to? And I knew it was not, it wasn't part of the Christian faith historically at all. And it just really disturbed me deeply. I started asking fellow pastors to help me understand where Russell had gone wrong. I presented Russell's arguments to them over a series of months on Saturday mornings, and that did not prove to be profitable. In fact, I was labeled as a heretic and kind of blackballed from, in a way. But that wasn't my position. I was trying to understand how to avoid that full preterist position. And that experience kind of launched me into a very long study of trying to understand how James Stewart Russell could be correct on so many of his interpretations, I thought. And yet where he went wrong in his placing of all things in AD 70. And it took years and years of research, including finding Warren's book and books like that, I was finally able to put some things together in a way that made sense to me and that I could feel comfortable with, in my own reading through the New Testament and the Old Testament too, for that matter, but that I could feel comfortable that I could accept the statements that were being made at face value, and I didn't have to squirm and force and feel uncomfortable with the way I was interpreting things. So that's kind of the impetus for it. And the book is kind of the end product of that process. I'm not claiming that it is the final answer. I'm not claiming that it's perfect, but it satisfies my understanding and reading of the New Testament better than anything else I've ever found.
Right. And it's a very well, detailed, very well written book. Like I had said, I did a previous video, which you reviewed. And I said, alone, just for the research alone, it's worth getting the book, because you've just amassed a colossal amount of sources and just a colossal, just such a wide array of theological literature to back your position. Let me ask you: have you found a lot of I guess not a lot of people, coming to your view, but have you found a lot of interest generated from this book? What has the interest been like?
Well, I am not a good marketer, and McGann Publishing published the book, and they're a small publishing house with not a lot of marketing budget either. So it's not been a bestseller. In a way, it's done better than I had expected, and there have been pockets. I do a blog, and I've gotten readers from several continents now that are giving me feedback and asking questions, as you'd expect. So I, to be honest about it, feeling I don't know the numbers of books that have sold. I really wasn't that interested in that, but I do know enough anecdotal accounts of people that have read the book and talked about how it affected their view and and they're thankful for it, and it's very rewarding from that standpoint. But it's hard for me to say that it's not been overwhelming. I'll put it that way.
Well, I mean, it's a worthy book as far as I'm concerned. It's a good alternative to say amillennialism, which takes these time frame references and stretches them out to 2,000 years and counting. And so you focus heavily on the time frame references and on imminency, which basically is a process of preterist interpretation. But this is really a foundation of I would say your approach. And one of the things that I've noticed with other views, even premillennialists as well, is they'll take phrases like "soon," "at hand," "about to," this generation, and they'll posit accommodated interpretations. They'll say, well, no, it's not man's time, it's God's time, etc. And so you take it at face value. And I think what you end up with is a much more coherent system. But I also think that what it does is it brings into sharper focus this aspect of the current age we're living in now, which is Christ's presence. So let me ask you, because this is something that I didn't quite get from your book, but it seemed like you were implying that the Great Commission in Matthew chapter 28 is this something that started in AD 70, or do you see this as being obviously coextensive with the present age, or was this something that ended in AD 70? How would you view that?
Well, I believe that the events that occurred that God brought to pass in the last days of the Mosaic age, these are my terms, and I think you understand my terminology, but I'm looking at the law age from Moses to the coming of Christ, as I call that the Mosaic age. I call the age that we're in now the Messianic age in most cases. The kingdom age might be another good term. But I see things that God did in the last days of the Mosaic age, that final generation before the temple fell, as preparatory for the establishment, or part of the establishment, of the kingdom of God. And then the prophecies in the Old Testament regarding what that kingdom would be like, and that there would come a time when eventually the knowledge of the Lord covers the earth as waters cover the sea, and the nations would come to worship Christ and so forth, as being accomplished during this Messianic age that we're in now. And how does that occur? Well, it occurs by the preaching of the gospel, and I believe the Great Commission applies to the age that we're in now, and that it's through the church's preaching of the gospel, the establishment of local churches, as we see in the book of Acts, and then from like the churches in Macedonia, Philippi, and others, that the gospel goes forward from those churches, and other churches are established in that process. And I believe that process is going on now, and that it will go on through the remainder of the Messianic age until the things that God promised are accomplished in this age. So I make a distinction between, in Matthew 24, Jesus saying that the gospel of the kingdom would be preached to the nations as a witness of what he was about to do in that generation, and the preaching of the gospel that Jesus commissioned in what we call the Great Commission, making disciples of the nations. That's something that is age long, and I think that we're in that. To me, that's a great part of this, of what I see, what I call Inmillennialism, is that it makes what we're doing now relevant. Our participation in God's churches, our efforts to live holy lives, to have families where we raise children and nurture an admonition of the Lord, our efforts to support missions. It makes all of that relevant to what we're doing now, because we have this long-term view of what God's kingdom is to accomplish, and we're part of it. We're everything that we do is geared toward the accomplishment of that vision. So no, it was certainly not confined to AD 70.
Right, and I would agree. I would agree 100%. So our focus in this age, because I know you're taking a view that's like, the polar opposite of a futurist view, and they would say, well, we're supposed to be busy during this age, but we're also supposed to be busy, looking for things, looking at Israel, etc. So your focus would be on mainly on evangelizing the nations, on building churches, and then do you see like a sort of I don't like to use the phrase Christian nationalism, but would you hold more of a nationalistic view of our responsibility now as far as getting the gospel out? Is this something that's going to filter into society? Is this something that we're supposed to do? Are we supposed to be involved in governmental work through our churches? How do you see this on a nationalistic level?
Well, let me just say that I believe this is an area that needs a lot of attention from. I'm a Baptist. I'm a Reformed Baptist believer. I love my Presbyterian brethren. I love my theonomic brethren, and I just. But this needs a lot of thought and a lot of work. I don't think that I'm not aware of many optimistic covenantal Baptists that have thought through what this looks like. No, I'm not a Christian nationalist. To answer your question directly, I think that the growth of the kingdom and its influence in society and government is more organic, and it comes from the ground, from the bottom up. In other words, the more the gospel leavens a society, the more churches there are, the more people in the churches they are that are obeying Christ, things are going to change naturally. I don't think we need to. I think we've seen a lot of attempts in history to impose a Christian law system on societies that weren't ready for it. And I think our focus should be on making disciples, discipling them, and making, and building churches and leavening society that way. And I think the effect on government, on the arts, on education will be organic in that way. But that needs a lot of work. Needs somebody a lot smarter than me to think through all that.
Right. How would you see Revelation? Because this is like one of the big controversies between most other systems and preterism is they'll say, well, Revelation, whether they be futurist or historicist or whatever, they'll see a large part of Revelation being unfulfilled. But then preterists will say, well, no, this was fulfilled. So how would you position passages like Revelation chapter 21, where now it's talking about, the God's presence being with man? Do you see this as being a millennial passage, or do you see this as pertaining to the new heaven and new earth? Because I'm assuming that you would hold that most of Revelation has been fulfilled, right?
Right. Well, the answer you just said, do I see this as Revelation 21 and 22 as a millennial passage? And what was the other term you said? You remember?
Is it, well, would you see it as a,
and you have a new heaven and new earth.
Yeah. Right.
Well, the answer is, and I know this is a little bit of a sticky subject here, but my answer would be both. I think this is a millennial passage in the sense that I believe the millennium, the 1,000 years in Revelation 20, is a description, a figurative description of the Messianic age, and that we're in that now, and we're looking forward to those end events that include the resurrection and general judgment at the end of this age. So I would agree with the amillennialists in that perspective. So I believe that Revelation 21 and 22 is a recapitulation. In other words, it moves us back after we go through Revelation 20, and we wind up with the resurrection and the general judgment at the end. I think Revelation 20 is going back to what John is seeing as about to happen in his generation, and it's the destruction of the old heavens and earth of Judaism. It's the establishment of the new heavens and earth under Christ. And Revelation 21 and 22 are about that. Now, let me explain just a moment, okay? I don't believe that Revelation 21 and 22 are confined to this age. I believe that the things that are here also contain descriptions of the way things will be in the eternal state. Okay, so why would I think that Revelation 21 and 22 pertain to something other than the eternal state? Well, you have things like the leaves on the trees on either side of the river of water of life are for the healing of the nations. Well, there aren't going to be nations that need to be healed in the eternal state. You have in Isaiah 65 and 66, which I take to be a parallel description of the new heavens and new earth. You have physical death. You have a child that dies at 100 years of age will be thought to die young. Well, that longevity is there, but there's still physical death in the new heavens and new earth. And then at the end of Revelation 22, you have an interesting situation. You have John being told that he's going to see the bride of Christ. And what does he see? He sees the new Jerusalem coming down out of heaven. And outside of this new Jerusalem, there are dogs and sorcerers and whoremongers and murderers and idolaters and so forth. And the gates of the city are open. And inside, the people that are inside the city are saying to those outside of the city, these polluted, wicked people, the Spirit and the bride say, "Come," and let him that heareth say, "Come," and so forth. So they're being invited to come into this heavenly Jerusalem, the bride of Christ. And so that's not a description of the eternal state, unless we believe in a lot of other things about second chances after death and things like that. This is a description of things that exist now. And we're inviting, that's what we're doing when we preach the gospel and proclaim that Christ is God's salvation to mankind. And we preach the gospel and we say to those outside, "Come in. This is where life is. This is where eternal life is. This is where peace and joy are." And so, I take Revelation 21 and 22 to be a description of the new heavens and new earth that we're in now, with the caveat that this is not the final state of it. We're going to see a time that because of what God did in the last days of the Mosaic age in establishing his kingdom, everything that happens after that is the result of that kingdom being established. And that includes the final death, the final enemy of Christ. Paul says in 1 Corinthians 15 that Christ must reign until all of his enemies are made his footstool. And then he specifically says the last enemy that will be destroyed is death. Well, he's not talking about spiritual death, because Jesus has already said those that believe on him would not ever taste of death. So he's talking about physical death at the end of the messianic reign, and that final enemy will be destroyed in the resurrection. There will be a final judgment and the casting of uh, death into the lake of fire and so forth, where the beast and false prophet are. And so sin will finally be purged from God's good creation. So that's kind of a long-winded answer, but that's the way I see it.
Right. So how would you view the beast of the false prophet? I'm assuming that you think that the judgment of the beast and the false prophet took place in AD 70, right? Would you understand the beast as being Emperor Nero? How would you view that?
I think it's I think he's the personification of the beast. Yes, his number 666. I know you know all those arguments that
Right.
uh, his name in Hebrew equates to 666. He was called the beast. He was a beastly character. And so because I think Revelation is about things that would shortly come to pass in John's future, yes, I would take that to be uh, a description of him as the head of the Roman Empire.
Right. One of the things I pointed out in my video, and I really liked this, was you got into well, first of all, you have a lot of the diagrams and charts in your book, which is really helpful. But one of the diagrams details the 40 years in the wilderness, the transitional period. And this is something I haven't seen. There's not a lot of literature about the 40 years in the wilderness, at least from a historic perspective, perhaps from full preterism. But how does this play a part in your understanding? Do you believe that the law was still in effect until AD 70, or do you see a cutoff point? Because a lot of the millennialists I'll talk to, they say, well, no, the law ended at the cross. But then when you look, you see that there's still some things going on, especially like when you get to the destruction of Jerusalem, where you see the curses of the law being carried out. So you would see the law ending in AD 70, not on the cross, right?
That is correct. And it was the event that brought an end to the law and the temple occurred on the cross, of course, but not. But that it's a whole series of events. The Elijah in the person of John the Baptist had to come. Christ had to live a perfect life. He had to die on the cross. He had to be resurrected. All these things had to occur in order for the law age to end. And so, yeah, you read the book of Hebrews, and there's a lot of present tense verbs there. The law was not going to end as long as the temple is standing, and so forth. And so, yeah, I think the official end of the law age and of the law itself occurred in AD 70. That's when the daily sacrifices were ended, and so forth. So,
Right.
but
And
can I just kind of piggyback a little bit on what you were
yeah.
saying about that 40 year period
Mhm.
uh, being a type of what happened under Moses, being a type of what happened under Christ. Um, I, I agree with you that the most I have seen written on that has been by full preterists, uh, some partial preterists, but uh, the majority has been by full preterists. However, there is a huge amount of literature about a second Exodus, and what happened under Christ was a second Exodus resembling what happened under Moses. And I'm talking about in the scholarly literature. there's just a huge body of writing about that, and a general recognition that there was some interplay between the Exodus under Moses and the Exodus under Christ. So I think the full preterists have done a better job of maybe documenting that and putting a lot of the detail in. And look, I think I'm sure that I credited others for the diagram that and I appreciate your I appreciate your review of that and what you said about it, but that's not original with me. Some of the things are, but most of it was not. But to me, it's very striking. It's based squarely on what Paul said in 1 Corinthians 10, that the things that happened to Israel were types and samples. The King James has. They were types of what was happening in Paul's day, and it's just striking to me. You don't have to invent those things. They're there, and to me, they fit Inmillennialism pretty well.
Right. So where do you see, I know you said that there's a physical resurrection that's still in our foreview. Where do you see this in relation to the timeline, or is there any timeline? Do you see this age is going on for like thousands of more years, or do you see us at the end? Because I've talked to some partial preterists that will tell you, well, I think we're in the little time now when Satan is unloosed. And this is something that I didn't hear like 15, 16 years ago. I've been hearing this more and more from partial preterists. So people saying that, we're in the little season now. So I guess that means we're at the end of the millennium, but where do you see us in relation to the larger timeline? Do you see us at the end, or do you see, thousands of years left to go? Is there still more things that we need to accomplish before the age can end? Where do you see us?
Well, I can see why anyone would think that we're in the little time at the end. The way our society seems to be going at the moment. I certainly can understand that, but I think we need to take a broader view and take our expectations from Scripture rather than from the newspaper or news media. So I tend to agree with post-millennial writers. I think this age is I heard an interview with Doug Wilson the other day, and he was talking about this, and I suspect that we're in the early days of the church. I think that we're when God, and I know these are symbolic numbers, and we don't need to be reading too much into it, but if God is faithful to his covenant for 1,000 generations, I believe that term 1,000 is a symbolic number for a much larger number. If God owns the cattle of 1,000 hills, he owns the cattle on many, many more than 1,000. In fact, he owns all of them. But if God is faithful for 1,000 generations, and a generation is rounded to 40 years, that would indicate 40,000 years. And I know people could shoot holes in my in my theology here and my thinking, but I'm just giving you my impressions. I think that it's probably going to be a much longer period of time than that. And I think that the things that are foretold about the age that we're in now, we've not seen anywhere close to that being fulfilled. It's the gospel is leavening the nations in the world now. And if you look at a map of the world before the coming of Christ, and you look at where the light of God's word existed, it was a very small dot on the eastern end of the Mediterranean Sea. And now the light of God's word, here I am in Alabama and feeling, I'm not sure where you are. Where are you?
I'm in southern Oklahoma.
Yeah, near Enid. Oh yeah, the
Yeah.
home of full preterism.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I'm about 50 miles west of Don Preston.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So here we are in these far distant places from Israel in 2024, talking about the wonderful things about the kingdom of God, and you look at a map of the world, and the gospel, some knowledge of Christ is in almost every country of the world, and so things have improved since the coming of Christ. Um, Ups and downs. I believe that we're in the United States, our culture is in a backsliding uh, position right now. Um, but long term, we still believe. I still believe that the gospel is going to be triumphant. That the nations are going to serve Christ in truth, not by an imposed governmental requirement, but from the heart. They're going to be true Christians that dominate in the societies of the world, and we're still involved in that process. I think it's a gradualism. It's like leavening the dough, leaven like a tree growing. It's like in Daniel 2. It's like the kingdom is like a rock hewn out of a mountain, and it grows and grows and grows and becomes a great mountain and fills the whole earth. So I think that we've got a long way to go. I'm not looking at this as a little season right before the very end.
How would you see Satan's activity now? Because there's a lot of people that will say, well, look at all that's happening in the world. And again, they're going to the newspapers and news media. How would you see Satan's activity now? I'm assuming he's still bound. So, he can't deceive the nations. Would you hold, because since if you're a Reformed Baptist, I'm assuming you would hold that it's just the elect that he can't deceive, right? It's not necessarily all of the nations en masse. It's basically it's the elect out of every nation. Is that how you see it?
Right, right, and I think that as time goes forward, if we want to take that line of reasoning, uh, I think that the number of the elect will increase in proportion to the number of people, the total number of population. Yeah.
Okay. And now I'm assuming you hold to no more ethnic Israel, because this is a big topic among prophecy buffs and even people who study eschatology. Is they'll go to their bookstore and they'll see, they'll look for the books on prophecy, and 99% of them are written from a futurist standpoint, where now we have to understand Israel, the nation, as somehow biblically significant. Now, one of the main points of a preterist interpretation is that Israel is not biblically significant insofar as they exist now as a nation, but that AD 70 was, I guess you would call it, what was it, the divorce of Israel? There's different views on this. How do you see AD 70 in relation to ethnic Israel, and what significance, if any, does ethnic Israel have today?
Yes, a hot button issue. I believe that the Mosaic covenant was made with Israel after the flesh. A minute ago, we were talking about 1 Corinthians 10, and Paul refers to ethnic Israel as Israel after the flesh. And God made a covenant with them, and that covenant included a physical land, it included a physical temple, physical high priest, physical sacrifices, and all those things. And I believe one of the fundamental underlying messages of the New Testament is that has changed. It is it's now been revealed to us the true definition of Israel all along. And Paul goes to great length in Romans 9, 10, and 11 to show us that not all of ethnic Israel, not all Israel after the flesh, was truly Israel. And who is truly Israel? Well, it's those that have true faith in God, and now those that have faith in Christ. So there was this huge transition. Well, I don't like the word transition, because that implies something like replacement theology and things like that. I don't think that's the right terminology or the best terminology. I think that what we're enjoying, the things that we're enjoying, are God's fulfillments to his covenants with Israel. Theirs is the covenant. It is Israel's covenant. And we as believers have been grafted into their stock, and it's them that bear us, not us them. And we need to be aware of that. So these are God's fulfillments to Israel. Now, who in Israel are going to enjoy those fulfillments? Well, it's those that are true Israel. And so an underlying message of the entire New Testament, as I understand it, is that the true definition of who is a Jew now, I mentioned Romans 9, 10, and 11. If we go all the way back to Romans chapter 2, Paul, to me, I don't know how he could have said it any plainer, that he is not a Jew, which is one outwardly. Neither is that circumcision which is outward in the flesh, but he is a Jew which is one inwardly. And circumcision is out of the heart and the spirit, and not the letter, whose praise is not of men, but of God. So, yes, true Israel is defined that way. We are the true circumcision that worship God in spirit and have no trust in the flesh, Paul says in Philippians. So this is a underlying fundamental truth of the New Testament. God defines Israel now as those who have faith in Christ, and his covenant with fleshly Israel ended in AD 70, and that's when he destroyed the temple, and the day of sacrifices ceased, and so that's when that ended, in my view.
Right. And a lot of people would agree. And I agree with a lot of your positions. And that's one of the things that I found refreshing when I read this book, is that I agree with like a lot of your positions. And I would add some of them I would allocate differently. But I got to ask you, how long did it take you to write this book? Because it's so thoroughly researched and it's so well written. I'm thinking it must have taken you several months, if not possibly years. How long did it take you to write this?
That's I don't know the aggregate number. It elapsed over a period of about 15 years.
Oh, wow.
Now, that's not saying I was busy working on it full time during that period, but it took a lot of time. I started getting toward the end. I wanted to publish a book. I started going to the Southern Christian Writers Conference, and I met an agent, a literary agent there, that kind of took me under his wing a little bit and gave me some advice. And the thing that put me over the top is my wife, Betty. She got tired of me talking about how I wanted to get it done and finished. And finally she said, if you don't have this book manuscript ready to give to Bruce, the agent, at the next conference, I'm going to quit praying for you. And that said, oh my goodness, my wife is going to quit praying. I better get it done. So I made a big effort and got it done. But it took a long period of time and a lot of hours. But thank you so much for your recognition of that. That's a great blessing.
Right. And it's like I said, it's a great book. I would recommend it to anyone. What are your long-term plans? Do you have plans to write another book, or do you plan on doing some conference speaking, or any kind of projects that you're working on now to get this information out there?
Maybe I could get your advice on that. I've had some people that read the book and they went like this. They'd go like, I just went over my head.
Right.
Uh, and I've had some people saying, why don't you write a simpler book? And I'm working on that now. Um, what do you think of that idea?
Well, I think this book here, I think it's a very, like I said, it's very well written. I can't, say it enough good about it. But yeah, simpler. I mean, this is obviously written from a more technical perspective, which is good when you deal with, professional theologians and people who really have studied eschatology for a number of years. But to get it out to the masses, that might be a good thing to write a simpler book that hits some of the more salient points, like especially the timing indicators, because I don't think a lot of, say, futurists or people who are raised in a dispensational or premillennial background, I don't think they really understand the timing argument and why it's such a compelling part of the preterist paradigm and why it moves a lot of people in that direction. I think, from my own personal perspective, I think that would be the biggest thing that would need to be, delved into, first and foremost would be the time frame indicators, and to try to set those nine pins, because a lot of Christians, like you said, that it just goes right over their heads. But I think it's a great idea. Any conferences or anything like that you plan on speaking at?
I don't have any speaking plans, Phelan. Now, what I would like to do, if the Lord gives me time and energy and stamina and motivation, I would like to write as many commentaries on the New Testament as possible, not thorough commentaries, but to show how this paradigm, um, I don't know what I should say, fits, accounts for, describes the material in each of the books. And I know you mentioned that I didn't deal with First Thessalonians 4 and 5 in the book, um, which is valid. That's something that needs to be done. But I would like to write commentaries on Revelation, Hebrews, First Thessalonians, Second Thessalonians. Uh, I would like to do that. So we'll see. I've made some starts on it, and I've got a lot of material on the blog um, toward that end. But yes, I would like to get those writing projects done. And I'm open to speaking at conferences, but so far I don't have any lined up.
Right. Well, I recommend the book, and anyone that's interested in the book, where would they go? They would go probably to Amazon, right? You don't sell them from your website or anything. You just pretty much through Amazon.
I'm working on a redesign of the website. That hopefully we'll be able to do that. But for now, it's on Amazon. If you just typed in the Inmillennialism word, it should come up.
Okay. All right. Wonderful. So we're about at the 50-minute mark. I do very much appreciate your time and your expertise. Again, this is an excellent book for our viewers. Please go ahead, go to Amazon, order yourself a copy. I ordered I ordered the hardcover because I'm a book aficionado. Um, but I guess I'll leave you with the last word. Is there anything that we missed? Is there any last words, any announcements, any input or words of wisdom that you'd like to impart to our audience? I'll let you have the last word.
Well, thank you, Phelan. And listen, I just so much appreciate your willingness to read the book and to offer a criticism of it. I took it very seriously, and that's something that's not many people have done that. In fact, you're the only one that offers some really serious, thoughtful feedback, and I'm thankful for that. when I started pursuing this, it was to try to keep from becoming a full preterist. I knew that that was a heretical position, and I did not want to go there. I think I was blessed to be able to find something that kept me out of that what I call heresy. But as time has gone forward, I have seen that the bigger issue is preaching the gospel of the kingdom. I heard a sermon a while back that talked about the first 84 preachers in the New Testament. John the Baptist, Jesus, the 12 apostles, and the 70 that he anointed to preach, all were commissioned to preach the gospel of the kingdom and to say certain things about the kingdom. So the primary benefit of this book, in my opinion, is what do we say about the kingdom? Is it one that God means to diminish in influence in this age? As some of the models, some of the paradigms say, is it a delayed kingdom that will only be fully established in the future? Or is it a present kingdom that we're a part of now, and what we do matters now as far as the spread of the kingdom? And so to me, what began as a project to try to keep from going into error has become a motivation to me for spreading the gospel, living out the gospel, and participating in God's local churches in this age, in the here and now, with the belief that we're going to be successful. Maybe not in the short term, but in the long term, we're going to be successful in evangelizing the nations. So that's I guess the last word I'd like to leave is, if you consider this book and consider another view of prophecy, consider that as a strong point of the book. What does it say about the kingdom, the gospel of the kingdom? What are we proclaiming about the kingdom now? And again, thank you so very much.
Well, thank you, sir, for your time, and I look forward to seeing more from your pen. And I'll also post a link to your blog in the comment description. But thanks again. God bless.
Lord bless you, brother. Thank you.